Yo everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing a review, a mini tutorial, and showing you some swatches of the brand new Huda Beauty Pastels Obsessions eyeshadow palettes. So these are her mini eyeshadow palettes, which she calls Obsessions. There's a whole range of Obsessions eyeshadow palettes, which every now and then Huda tends to release depending on what her mood is or what the trends are. At the moment in 2020, aside from coronavirus, which I'm so sick of hearing about, pastels are the trend for 2020, similar to 2019 when we had the neon trend and she released 3 neon mini Obsessions palettes. She has now released some pastel ones. Huda Beauty, as I've said to you guys before, is always very on trend, which is one of the reasons why I like the brand so much, that it keeps up to date with what is popular at the current time. So altogether there are 3 eyeshadow palettes. There's the Pastels Mint one, the Pastels Lilac one, and the Pastels Rose one. These retail at £27 each. The reason why they cost £2 more than the normal Obsessions ones is because those ones come in a cardboard box, whereas these ones come in plastic packaging. Again, she's done it to annoy me. Can you stop using these bloody useless plastic casing for these eyeshadow palettes? What is the point? It literally serves no purpose whatsoever other than to be environmentally unfriendly. There's no need for them. No need for it at all. The smaller Obsessions palettes are always made in China, not sure why, and then the larger ones of hers tend to be made in Italy. Again, I don't understand why they're both not made in the same place. Anyway, so I'm going to read to you what the claims are and what the description is direct from her website. It says a range of delicious pastels eyeshadow palettes. Why are they called Pastels eyeshadow? Why do you call it Pastel Rose? Pastel Mint. Why is it Pastels Rose? A range of delicious pastels eyeshadow palettes inspired by Huda's latest fashion obsession for pastels colours. Each palette offers versatile looks from subtle to vivid and colourful. Each Huda Beauty Pastels Obsessions palette is packed with a selection of highly pigmented matte shades, metallic jellies and next generation shimmer swirls, all in smooth and blendable textures. So all 3 of them have been given a little bit of a description of their own. So the first one is the rose one, which looks like this. I will obviously show it to you guys up close. So the Pastels Rose Obsessions is a wearable collection of dreamy ballet pink and blush peach mattes, delicate shimmers and sunshine yellows. This palette will suit each and every skin tone and take you from day to night in the sweep of a brush or a dab of your finger. The Pastels Lilac Obsessions, a seductive series of dusty mauve mattes, lavender shimmers, pops of luxurious fizzy violet, a velvety apricot matte and a pop of soft coral shimmer, all designed to complement each other and add divine dimension to the lids. And then finally the mint one, an unusual balance of warm and cool tones. This palette indulges your lids in soft mint and apple green mattes, pistachio, teal and icy aqua shimmers, a touch of honey bronze shimmer and a rich tan matte. So that is how all 3 have been described. Now, I'm going to be very honest with you guys, like I'm not as it is. You guys know that I've generally always given the Obsessions palettes a 10 out of 10. This is the first time that I'd probably give them around an 8. And an 8 I would still say is me being quite generous. And I am averaging it out. There are some palettes which are better performing than others. And when I go into detail about each one, I will explain myself. Now, the thing is, firstly, she has said that these eyeshadow palettes suit all skin tones. No, they don't, love. Why are you lying? I want to see somebody with deep skin pull off this, really. Now the thing with pastel shades, it can be very difficult to make sure that they are not powdery, chalky or ashy on the skin because of the tone. Wearing pastel shades is very different to wearing it in makeup form or eyeshadow form on your face. And that is even for somebody like me who is on the lighter end of the medium skin tone spectrum. I find pastel shades can be very difficult and can also sometimes show up ashy or powdery against my skin tone. Now I would definitely say that these would work well on fair and medium skin tones. I do not think that any of these will work well on deep skin tones at all. And I'm not making that up. Yes, you can use shimmery shades, but are you really going to go out of your way to spend £27 on a couple of shimmery shades, but you can't use the matte shades at all because they will blend out into nothingness in your skin or just make you look ashy and slightly ill. Now I have to say, in terms of the texture of the matte shades, they are not as good as they have been in previous Obsessions palettes. I find they kick up quite a lot of powder. You definitely have to tap your brush off, otherwise it will drop on your face. And because they are quite powdery, they have that thing where when you start to apply it to your lid, you have to go in quite heavy, otherwise it will shear out too much and almost disappear, especially if you try to layer it. Now I've layered quite a lot of shades on my eyelids, but that is specifically for the purposes of this video. Now in terms of the shimmer shades as well, forget about using a brush. It's almost pointless, and I've said this in previous videos about her shimmery shades. The majority of them are best applied either with your finger or with a wet brush to get maximum opacity. Otherwise they can be very, very sheer. Now I'm using one on my lid. I can still see my natural lid through it, and I applied it with my fingers rather than a wet brush. But that is something to bear in mind. They are very, very shimmery. The shimmer does also drop into other places on your face. It doesn't stick and adhere to the skin as much as I would like. Now I have used the Urban Decay Primer Potion on my eyelids when using this. If you do not, and if you use it on bare skin, it will pretty much, your natural skin color will just eat up the shades. A lot of these shades in here, even for me, do not show up much on my natural skin tone. Now you can imagine, for somebody who's got skin color as mine, that's the issues I have. You can imagine how difficult it will be if you've got much deeper skin than me. I'm also not sure why the shimmery shades are called metallic jellies. They do not have a jelly type of texture to them. They're very soft to the touch, but I do not get a jelly feel from them. They're very, very shimmery, but they're quite sheer. You have to layer them a lot, like I've said. Now you've got the shadows in here which are referred to as next generation shimmer swirls. Now they've definitely got more of a kind of packed together sort of texture. They're more jellyish in terms of texture than the ones that have been described as jelly. These swirl shades are basically a mixture of colors that have been put together to then create a certain color. So despite the fact that it may look a certain way in the pan, it's very different to how it will appear on the skin. So it's best to swatch it on your hand. For example, this one here has got a mixture of like lemon and pink, and on the finger it kind of comes out a bit peach. So because there's a combination of shades in there, it's not how it appears in the pan. It's more for aesthetic purposes. They've done it like this just so that it looks cute and pretty in the palette itself. I also have to say, and I'm going to show this to you while I do it, for these shimmery shades, as much as they apply to the lid best with the finger or a wet brush, quite a lot of product sticks to the finger and stays there. So there's so much product on the finger and not as much on the lid, which is really annoying and quite wasteful as well. Now let me just go through each palette before I show you swatches. The Rose palette itself. Where's the rose? Where's the rose in the Rose palette? There's no real pink shades in here. There's one here which is more of like a mauvey colour. It's even called Mauve Matte. It is, it's called Mauve Matte. So that's not rose. This one here is called a Blush Pink Matte. I would not even call that a blush pink. That's a very, 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 very pale, very, very pale pink. And I actually used that to set my eyeshadow primer. It didn't actually show up against my skin tone whatsoever. This shade here is a peach. That shade here is like a dusky rose. But there's no actual proper pink shade in what I would assume should have one, considering it's called Rose. Don't make sense to me. The shimmery shades are lovely. Don't get me wrong, I really like the colours that there are in here. However, for the reasons I've already mentioned, they just don't perform as well as I would have liked. If they had a slightly better texture, a more jelly type of texture, a thicker texture, they would have applied a lot more better to the eyes than they currently do. Now with the Lilac palette, what confuses me is one of the shades in here is described as a Dusty Rose Matte. But didn't we just have a Dusty Rose Matte in here? Didn't I just say it? It's on her website, you guys. I'm not making up, it's on Huda's own website. So apparently this shade in the middle is a Dusty Rose Matte, and this one on the end is also a Dusty Rose Matte in the Rose palette. They are not the same colour, or are they? No, this one's a bit more caramel and this one's a bit more peach. Why have you given them the same description if they're exactly the same colour supposedly? And weird. So this one, it says it has a seductive series of dusty mauve mattes. So basically it's full of grapey, lilac-y, purpley shades. Lavender shimmers. So yeah, there are different types of shimmery lavender shades which are pretty. There are 3 in here, different types. There is a coral shimmer, which is this one here on the end, which is absolutely beautiful. And then there are 1 or 2 kind of peachy shades. Peach and purple, orange and purple as well, tend to go really nice. They're 2 shades that complement each other beautifully. I would probably say out of all 3 of these, this one is probably my favourite palette, purely because the shades are a lot deeper, so they show up a lot better against my skin tone. Plus I generally tend to go for more purples and pinks anyway, as they again go with my skin tone very nicely. But the same comments apply to the shimmery shades as well as the shimmer swirl shades as well, of where there is 1 in this palette. But out of all 3 of them, this is the one where every single shade in here works with my skin tone. The lighter lavender one, I definitely have to layer it, otherwise it will look ashy against my skin tone. Now the mint one, which is what some people will be interested in, especially because it's got green, and especially having a pastel minty green is a very difficult colour to create in terms of an eyeshadow. And it says it's an unusual balance of warm and cool tones. Yes, I wouldn't really call it an unusual balance, I'd call it equally balanced. With mint and apple green mattes, I do not think these 2 perform that well at all. They're slightly patchy, and you have to layer them quite a bit, because otherwise 1 layer is not enough and it starts to disappear quite quickly, even with primer. The deeper shade at the top in the corner performs a lot better, but I find it to be a little bit patchy as well. I'd probably say out of all 3 of these palettes, this one is probably the worst performing one. That's mostly down to the green shades more than anything else. And then I like the inclusion of this kind of warm brown shade, and then you've got this swirly shade which is a caramel sort of colour mixed with green, and then you've got this turquoise mint swirl one as well, which is really, really pretty. But again, the same comments apply for these shimmery shades as well. They definitely perform better with your finger or with a wet brush. Using it with a brush on its own is almost pointless. It doesn't pick up that well on the brush. Most of it drops off. It shears out quite a lot as well. And that is the reason why I have given an average mark of 8 out of 10 for all 3 of these palettes. I would say that all the other Obsessions palettes she's released in the past are a lot better than these ones. I think in terms of it being pastel, she could have done a little bit more in terms of making them slightly deeper so that they show up pastel still against other people's skin tones. The shimmery shades do save a lot of these palettes more than anything else, because it is the shimmer that really stands out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through each individual palette for you guys and give you my thoughts on each shade. So then it's up to you what kind of decision you want to make, whether or not you think it's worth buying them or not. I don't regret buying them, don't get me wrong. I really do love Huda Beauty's eyeshadows. I think it was quite disappointing to see the amount of people that were comparing her eyeshadow palettes to Colourpop. I found it quite petty and quite childish. At the end of the day, monochromatic shades or any kind of shades are not exclusive to just one brand. Everybody does it, everybody's doing it. Some people do it before others. It can take up to a year's worth of research before you create something, so grow up, people. So this is the first one, the Pastels Rose palette. I really like the outside. It kind of reminds me of superheroes. It's pretty cool, and again, like I said, it's made of solid plastic. There's a decent mirror at the top, and here are all 9 shades within this palette, which again, just to remind you, retails at £27. Altogether, there are 5 matte shades, 3 shimmery shades, and then this one kind of swirly shade in the middle. Okay, this one here is referred to as a peach matte shade. And as you can see, it is peach. It's a very, very pale peach matte shade. As a thick swatch, it shows up on my hands. But if I was to blend it out on my lid, I would have to layer it quite a lot for it to show up. And even then, it would be quite chalky on me. This next one here is described as a ballet pink shimmer. And as you can see, if you look closely enough, you can probably see my natural skin colour through it. This has to be layered quite a lot. You can use this on your lid, on your brow bone, or on your tear duct as well. This one here is described as an icy pink shimmer. Again, very similar texture to the previous shade. You would have to layer it quite a lot for it to show up as fully opaque. This one here is described as a mauve matte shade. This one is definitely one of the better performing matte shades because it's deeper in tone than a lot of the other ones. But I do have to layer this once or twice for it to show up as dark as I would like it, or as opaque as I would like it. This one in the middle is described as a pink lemon swirl. So this is like a mixture of shades. So despite the fact that it is apparently different in texture, it shows up exactly like the shimmery shades. The only difference is this is like a duochrome because it is a mixture of pink and lemon. So it just depends on how the light will hit it, or how it will show up on your skin. This one here is described as a lemon shimmer. Very pretty lemony colour, but again, same texture as all the other shades, so you would have to layer it a few times for it to be fully opaque. This one is described as a sunshine yellow matte shade. This one is awful. I don't know whose skin tone that's going to show up on. You can see the way that the swatch is, it's not clean, it's quite patchy and it drags. Once it's blended out, it will blend out into pretty much nothing on the skin. This one is described as a blush pink matte. This one is definitely a very, very pale baby pink matte shade. Again, quite chalky. I use this to set my primer as it pretty much does not show up against my skin tone when it's applied with a brush. This one here is described as a dusty rose matte shade. This is one of the better performing mattes in the palette along with this one here. This one is very beautiful, shows up beautifully against my skin tone, and it's nice and even and doesn't go patchy. So this is the entirety of the Pastel Rose palette. So this is what the outside of the Pastels Lilac palette looks like, and these are the 9 shadows on the inside. So this first one here is described as a grape matte shade. I personally would not call that a grape. Grape has definitely got more red in it. Have you seen the colour of grapes, people? They do not look this colour, or even close. This is more of a lilac-y, deep lilac sort of shade. It's fairly well in terms of its performance, and once you build it up, the colour shows up really nicely against the skin. This one is described as a violet shimmer. This is a shimmery shade, a violet with like flecks of purple and pink within it. Again, it's something that you would need to layer a few times to get it to show up fully opaque. This one here is described as a lavender shimmer. Beautiful colour, but again, same comments as before with all the other shimmery shades. This one is described as a coral shimmer. Absolutely gorgeous colour, and this one is definitely a lot more opaque and pigmented than a lot of the other shimmers. This is one that I would not need to layer more than once, thank God. This is the other one that's described as a dusty rose matte. Definitely not. This is for sure like a peachy matte shade, like a peachy pink matte shade. Again, this one performs fairly well, but you do have to layer it a few times for it to show up cleanly. This one is described as a peach violet swirl. I definitely can't detect any peach in it once it's applied to the skin, but as it's a duochrome shade, it just depends on how the light hits it, then the peachness comes out. This is the one I'm actually wearing on my lid. Again, similar comments as to the other shimmery shades. I had to layer it at least 4 times so that you can see the look that I've got on my eyes. This one here is described as a lavender matte shade. This is a very, very pale lavender. Again, almost pointless against my skin tone because it will just make my skin look quite ashy. This one here is described as a peach matte shade. This one is a very, very pale peach matte shade. I have to layer this a few times for it to show up against my skin tone, then it just about does. But anyone deeper, it would show up very chalky and ashy on your skin tone, and it comes off very easily as well. Like if I was to blend it like that, you see that? Where's it gone? Where'd you go, bro? Where'd you go? Same with that one. Look. See what happens? They just wipe off very easily. And then this one on the end is described as a violet matte shade. Very pretty violet shade. But again, this one has to be layered quite a few times, and it performs similarly to the other matte shades, especially these ones where after a while you can see it just very easily rubs off. So these are all 9 of the Pastels Lilac palette. Okay, so this is the outside of the Pastels Mint palette, and here are all of the 9 shadows inside. So this first one here is described as a pistachio matte shade. That don't look like pistachio to me. This one is a matte shade, patchy, chalky and just pointless, easily just rubs off just like that. So a very poorly performing shadow. This next one here is called Mint Shimmer. This is the shade that I'm actually using on my tear duct. I applied it with a brush and it was fine. However, it was just a tear duct brush or a small brush, so I didn't have to worry about layering it much. But again, this one definitely needs to be layered a few times for it to show up properly. This one is described as an apple green matte. Again, this one performs similarly to the number 1 shade. Patchy, chalky and easily rubs off. This one is described as a turquoise mint swirl shade. Barely even shows up. This is one of those ones which works great as a topper. A lot of these shimmery shades work better as toppers rather than on their own because they're just not opaque enough. This one shows up very much as like a pale brown shade with silver shimmers in it. This one here is described as a mint silver shimmer. Again, pretty enough colour, but just not opaque enough. This one is described as a bronze shimmer. This one doesn't even have that much shimmer to it. At least the other ones, as much as they're not opaque enough, at least they're shimmery. This one's quite bland, it's a bit blah. This one is described as a tan matte shade. This one is a very pretty colour, which works well if it's layered more than once, but again, just very easily rubs off. This one is described as a turquoise mint swirl. I actually got them mixed up. This is a caramel mint swirl. So this is the turquoise one. Very pretty colour, just not opaque enough. This one here is described as a teal matte shade. This is another one which is one of the better performing matte shades, as it's not as patchy as the two greeny sort of shades at the beginning. This one is a lot more opaque, and this is all of the 9 shadows all together. Right, so that's all the swatches, and let me just say that was very easy to wash off my arm. I didn't have to use any makeup remover like I have to do with other eyeshadow swatches when I show them on my channel. They just wiped off very easily with a bit of water and some soap. That was it really. You know what? Now that I think about it, I'm really going to have to give these a 7 out of 10, not even an 8. I don't think that they deserve an 8 for all the reasons that I have given. They just do not perform as well as other Huda Beauty eyeshadows. I generally find her eyeshadows to be very, very good. Some of my favourite on the market. These ones are a very, very big letdown. And especially considering that they cost £27 each. They're not cheap whatsoever. Yeah, I just feel really disappointed. I was hoping for a lot more. I bought mine from Feel Unique. I have Huda Beauty set up as my brand for life, so I get 10% off anyway anytime I buy anything from Huda Beauty. And also I've built up quite a lot of Beauty Circle rewards. It's like their loyalty scheme. So I got an additional £8 or £10 off. So if you're ever interested in buying Huda Beauty products and you're in the UK, definitely look into using Feel Unique. That's who I tend to use. So that's it for my review of the pastel palettes. Not sure what else I can say. I would say that this one is definitely my favourite, and I've given the reasons for all of the other ones. Now I don't want to sound completely negative because I know a lot of you will be like, oh, really kind of feeling disappointed. These palettes are great for everyday, very, very quick looks. She's also written on her website that they're great for daytime to nighttime looks. How are you going to turn this into a nighttime look when you can't even see it on your eyes? You can't do any smoky looks. There aren't any shades that are dark enough to have a smoky eye or anything like that. But if you want a bit of sparkle at night, definitely, because the sparkle is very intense with these. It's just that they're quite sheer. But at night time, nobody will notice whether you can see your natural eyelid or not. They'll just see lots of shimmers. These are great for when you've got no time to get ready in the morning, because minimal blending is required, because you don't really have to blend out any harsh lines, as there are no shades that are deep enough that would create harsh lines. So if you want a quick swish through your crease, a little bit of a shimmery shade on the lid, and you're good to go. So very, very quick looks can be created with this palette. So that's it for my review of the brand new Huda Beauty Pastels Obsessions eyeshadow palettes. Like, comment, make sure you subscribe, let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll see you all soon. Bye!